Elizabeth I is considered one of the greatest queens to have ever reigned. She suffered from a bout of a very deadly illness that had been around in England for some time. Smallpox over the years killed millions around the globe.
England's greatest monarch was genetically male, could never have carried a child, and knew it every day of her 44-year reign. New AI analysis of Elizabeth I's DNA revealed a hidden royal secret so explosive that if it had surfaced in her lifetime, England would have collapsed into civil war before sunset.
She was cunning, she was vain, she was kind, she was very smart, and she was very manipulative.
What the algorithm found wasn't just a medical anomaly. It was the key to everything. The marriages she refused, the heirs she never produced, the image she weaponized, and the death no one was supposed to question. The woman who built a myth. Elizabeth I took the throne in 1558 at 25 years old, already a survivor, her mother beheaded, her father having declared her illegitimate. 2 years in the Tower herself, suspected of treason. By the time she became queen, she understood one truth above all others. Vulnerability was a death sentence. So, she built an image, the Virgin Queen, a woman who had chosen celibacy as a sacred calling, wedded not to any man, but to England itself, every portrait controlled, every public appearance staged.
The Catholics and the Protestants falling into and out of favor, people were never sure what they should say that they believe in.
Every word measured and calibrated. The most sought-after woman in Europe, courted by the King of Spain, the Archduke of Austria, the King of France, and she never once said yes. For 400 years, historians called it political genius, the ultimate long game. By keeping every suitor in permanent hope, she prevented any foreign power from claiming England through marriage. She turned her unmarried status into a weapon. That explanation always made sense, until an AI looked at her DNA. And what it found rewrites the long game entirely, the ghost in the genome. The research team couldn't open Elizabeth's tomb beneath Westminster Abbey, so they worked with what existed outside it, a small collection of authenticated biological artifacts with verified chains of custody, objects that never left documented royal possession across 4 centuries. The checkers ring, a locket Elizabeth rarely removed, believed to contain a lock of her hair, a pair of her ceremonial gloves still carrying microscopic epithelial cells, skin cells embedded in the fabric after 400 years of preservation, and a state letter to the King of France, sealed with wax pressed directly by Elizabeth's own thumb, which had preserved a single intact cell beneath its surface.
Elizabeth carefully reworded the Book of Common Prayer and said, "If you're close enough to this, it's good for England."
Any traditional laboratory would have discarded those samples immediately. 4 centuries of degradation, environmental contamination, handling by dozens of curators and archivists, the noise would have buried the signal completely. But this team had something no previous generation of researchers possessed. They called it Argus, named for the all-seeing giant of Greek mythology. Argus wasn't a data processor. It was a pattern recognition engine trained on millions of ancient and modern genomes, built specifically to separate authentic biological material from centuries of contamination. It cross-referenced every damaged fragment against verified genetic profiles from Elizabeth's confirmed bloodline, DNA previously recovered from the authenticated remains of Richard III, and Boleyn family samples with established provenance. The system ran billions of comparisons over weeks of continuous processing. Its conclusion came back at 99% confidence. The hair, the skin cells, the single cell trapped in the wax seal, all the same woman, directly tied to both the Tudor and Boleyn bloodlines. Dr. James Whitfield, the Cambridge geneticist leading the project, described the moment with 5 words. "We expected fragments. We got a ghost." With Elizabeth's identity locked in, Argus moved to reconstruction. Using genetic temporal modeling, the AI compared the confirmed fragments against tens of thousands of 16th century European genomes, learning what DNA from that exact era and geographic origin should look like. Then, chromosome by chromosome, it filled in the gaps. The result was unprecedented. A fully reconstructed virtual genome of Queen Elizabeth I, and buried inside it was something that stopped the entire team cold: the X chromosome. Deep in Elizabeth's reconstructed genome, Argus flagged a cluster of rare mutations on her X chromosome. Not lead poisoning, not the health struggles documented by royal physicians.
Because she's a female monarch, she knows that she can use her appearance in court to create a kind of loyalty and affection to her from the courtiers, not only through appearing in fantastic outfits, but in being painted in fantastic outfits that symbolize her leadership of the state.
Nothing the team had been investigating. The mutations were consistent with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, AIS. Here is what that means. A person with complete AIS carries XY chromosomes, genetically male at the biological level, but their body is entirely unresponsive to male hormones. The result is complete female development in every outward sense, in appearance, in identity, in every way the world sees and the person experiences themselves. They live as women, they are women, but they are born without a uterus, they cannot carry children, and the condition is invisible from the outside. A person with AIS can go their entire life without knowing, unless they try to conceive and discover that it is impossible. Read that again, slowly. Elizabeth. I didn't choose to be the Virgin Queen. She had no choice. Every prolonged diplomatic flirtation that dragged on for years and collapsed into nothing. Every near engagement that historians have spent centuries praising as brilliant political chess. It wasn't strategy. It was the only move available. In 16th century England, a queen's singular non-negotiable duty was producing a legitimate heir, not symbolic, not optional, demanded by law, by the church, and by the brutal arithmetic of political survival. A queen who could not produce an heir wasn't just a liability, she was an existential threat to the realm's stability. And if Elizabeth's condition had ever been exposed, the consequences would have been immediate. Her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, who already had a healthy son, would have had legal grounds to declare Elizabeth unfit for the throne. Spain, France, and the Vatican, who already despised the Protestant queen, would have used it as proof that God had cursed her reign. There would have been no time to respond. The throne would have been gone before she could move. So, she made it a choice. She made it sacred. She made celibacy look like devotion instead of biology. She turned the one thing that could destroy her into the defining mythology of her reign. Women with AIS often develop taller, leaner frames with noticeably longer fingers. Look at every surviving portrait of Elizabeth I. It's there. The thick white lead makeup she wore obsessively wasn't only a response to her smallpox scarring, it was armor. It erased ambiguity. It presented an impossible, flawless icon to a world that could never be allowed to see beneath the surface. And then came 1588. The Spanish Armada was bearing down on the English coast. Elizabeth rode to Tilbury to address her troops, soldiers prepared to die for a queen, who, if the secret broke that morning, would have had no throne left to defend. She looked out across that field and spoke the words that history has quoted ever since. I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. Every historian who has ever written about that speech called it bravado, defiance. A woman claiming equal power in a man's world. Sit in that line for a moment, because if Argus is right, those words weren't a metaphor. They weren't bravado. They were a confession, spoken aloud to thousands of soldiers who cheered without grasping what they had just been told. She stood in front of an army, on the edge of the greatest military crisis of her reign, and told them the truth. In a sentence no one in that field had the context to decode, she performed every single day of 44 years. And behind that performance was a person carrying a secret that, if it had slipped for one unguarded moment, would have ended everything. That is the real story of the Virgin Queen. Not genius, not strategy. Survival. Daily, exhausting, terrifying survival. If you want to see where this goes next, subscribe now, because what the AI found in her paternal bloodline is about to change everything you just heard. The father who wasn't. With the X chromosome finding confirmed, the team turned to what should have been routine, verifying Elizabeth's paternal bloodline against known Tudor genetic markers, a formality, a box to check before publishing. The maternal line came back clean. Elizabeth's mitochondrial DNA, passed exclusively through the female line, was a perfect match for the Boleyn family. She was, without any scientific uncertainty, Anne Boleyn's daughter. Then, they ran her genome against the Y chromosome markers of the Tudor dynasty, Genetic signatures confirmed from the authenticated remains of Richard III and other verified male Tudor descendants. The Y chromosome passes virtually unchanged from father to son across generations. It is the most reliable paternal fingerprint in all of genetics. If Henry VIII was her father, the match would have been immediate and unmistakable. There was no match. Zero. Dr. Marcus Chen, a statistical geneticist from Imperial College London, ran the comparison 3 separate times, widened every margin of error, adjusted every parameter. The result didn't move. He later told colleagues he felt physically ill when he read it. "The numbers don't lie," he said. "Henry VIII is not her father." Let that detonate for a second. The greatest monarch of the Tudor age, the woman who gave her name to an entire era of English civilization, the queen whose right to the throne was the foundation of everything. Every speech, every war won, every act of parliament signed across 4 decades, may not have been a Tudor at all. By the laws of her own time, that made her a usurper. And it means Anne Boleyn may have been exactly what Henry VIII accused her of being. History has treated those charges as fabrication for 500 years, a political murder dressed in legal language so a tyrant could clear the path to his next wife. Anne Boleyn has been rehabilitated by centuries of scholarship. The adultery charges were almost universally assumed to be invented. This data doesn't confirm every charge, but the central one, infidelity, the numbers suggest it was real. The paternal DNA markers point toward men inside Anne Boleyn's known circle. 2 names have been whispered at the margins of historical debate for generations. Henry Percy, the nobleman Anne had loved deeply before Henry VIII forcibly ended the relationship, and Mark Smeaton, the court musician executed alongside Anne, whose confession was always assumed to have been tortured out of him. This data suggests Smeaton may have been telling the truth all along. And then there is the question that may be the most haunting in all of this. Did Elizabeth know? Her father declared her illegitimate at age 2. Her mother was gone before Elizabeth. It could form a memory of her. She spent her childhood as a political object, raised, discarded, raised again, never secure. Historians have always pointed to the ferocity of her ambition as the defining force of her character. But what if it wasn't only ambition? What if it was a private, unspoken terror? The constant awareness that the throne beneath her feet rested on a secret that could be exposed at any moment by anyone who looked close enough. She held power for 44 years, carrying 2 secrets, either one of which could have ended her reign in a day. But Argus had one more finding, and this one didn't ask questions about who she was. It asked how she died. The virtual autopsy. The official explanation for Elizabeth's death in 1603 has always been considered adequate. She was 69 years old. She had spent decades applying Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic compound of white lead and vinegar, so corrosive it burned through skin over years of use. The cumulative lead, damage to her organs alone, would have been catastrophic. Add the deaths of several of her closest companions in her final months, the grief-driven physical collapse that followed, and history's conclusion has always been the same: a body worn down by poison, age, and sorrow. Argus rejected that conclusion. The lead damage to her liver was real. The model confirmed it. But when the AI simulated her final days against the historical record of her documented symptoms, the picture didn't hold together. The burning pain in her mouth, her absolute inability to lie down, the rigid, agonizing muscular stiffness that kept her upright for 4 consecutive days, propped by her ladies-in-waiting, seated on floor cushions, pointing silently at her own throat, refusing or entirely unable to speak. Lead poisoning doesn't produce that. Not that specific sequence, not that progression. Argus ran a full toxicological scan, testing thousands of known substances against her reconstructed body. Chemistry. It found a match. A precise, sophisticated combination of 2 compounds: aconitine, derived from wolfsbane, atropine, derived from belladonna, deadly nightshade. This was not an opportunistic poison. This was an assassination blend, constructed by someone with deep knowledge of herbalism and pharmacology. Someone who understood exactly how each compound interacted with the human nervous system. In controlled doses, belladonna produced fever, flushed skin, and disorientation. Symptoms any royal physician in 1603 would have attributed to a natural decline in an elderly woman. Meanwhile, wolfsbane worked silently, burning in the mouth, progressive inability to swallow, muscular rigidity that made lying flat unbearable. And then, across days, respiratory failure, not violent, not sudden. Her lungs simply stopped working. According to the model, Elizabeth I did not die peacefully. She was suffocated, gradually, deliberately, while fully conscious and completely unable to communicate what was happening to her. She knew, she could feel it, and she could not speak. The question of who becomes almost physically difficult to sit with. Foreign agents remain theoretically possible, but this poison required intimate, sustained access over multiple days. Someone inside the palace, someone trusted enough that their presence beside a dying queen raised no concern. Someone who had the knowledge to prepare the compound and the access to administer it repeatedly without detection. Two names surface from the evidence. The first is James VI of Scotland, the man waiting for Elizabeth's throne, who had spent years in restless correspondence about when exactly the crown would pass to him. The second is more chilling. Sir Robert Cecil, Elizabeth's own chief minister, and the son of the man she had trusted above all others for her entire reign. Robert Cecil had been secretly negotiating the succession with James for months, entirely behind Elizabeth's back. He needed a smooth, predictable transfer. He needed the Queen to die on a schedule, not recover unexpectedly and start asking questions about what had been arranged in her name. History records what happened next. Within hours of Elizabeth's last breath, Cecil had James proclaimed King of England. The transition was seamless, almost rehearsed. What the algorithm found. No tomb has been opened, no charges have been filed. Argus is a model, the most sophisticated of its kind ever applied to historical genetic reconstruction. But a model, the researchers say so themselves. What they cannot explain away is the coherence. Every finding connects, every symptom aligns. Every political calculation from her reign maps cleanly onto what the genome reveals. 400 years of managed mystery, clicking into place all at once. Elizabeth I wasn't simply a brilliant queen. She was a person fighting on three simultaneous fronts, against her own biology, against the lie at the center of her bloodline, and against a poison she never saw coming. She held the throne for 44 years on secrets that should have destroyed her. She turned every vulnerability into legend, and she took every truth to the grave, until Argus looked closer than anyone had ever dared. Who do you think ordered it, James or Cecil? Drop your answer in the comments because the evidence points somewhere most people don't expect. And if this changed how you see Elizabeth I, like and subscribe. There are more buried secrets that AI is only just beginning to uncover.